Welcome back to Grudge and Grace, where the shadows hold secrets and the truth is more terrifying than fiction. I'm your host, and tonight we're diving deep into the fog-shrouded hills of northern Maine, where a real estate agent's dream became her worst nightmare, and where a house doesn't just watch you, it chooses you. Before we begin, I want you to do something for me. Take a deep breath and listen to the silence around you. Notice how still everything is, how peaceful. Hold on to that feeling, because after tonight's story, you might find yourself wondering what's hiding in that silence, waiting for you to let your guard down. Tonight's tale comes from someone who contacted us through our encrypted tip line. She wouldn't give us her real name, wouldn't meet in person, and only agreed to share her story if we promised to change every detail that could identify her. After you hear what happened to her, you'll understand her paranoia. So turn off your lights, close your eyes, and let me tell you about Maya Chen and the house that wouldn't let her leave. But I have to warn you, some places don't just haunt you, some places hunt you. Are you ready? Let's step into the darkness. Maya Chen had been selling real estate in Portland, Maine for 8 years, and she thought she'd seen everything. Foreclosures where families had abandoned half-eaten meals on the table, crime scene properties where chalk outlines still stained the hardwood floors, houses so damaged by neglect that she needed a tetanus shot just to walk through them. But she'd never seen anything like the call that came in on that gray October morning. The voice on the other end was elderly, shaky, and desperate. "Miss Chen? My name is Eleanor Thorne. I need to sell my family's estate immediately. Today, if possible." Maya had heard urgency before, but this was different. This was fear. "Mrs. Thorne, I'd be happy to help, but these things take time. I'll need to schedule a viewing, get some comps, prepare the listing materials." "You don't understand." The old woman's voice cracked. "I can't go back there. I won't go back there. I'm calling from a payphone because I think it can hear through the phones in my house." Maya's first instinct was to hang up. Every real estate agent in Maine had dealt with their share of eccentric elderly clients, and this sounded like the beginning of a very long, very unprofitable relationship. But then Eleanor Thorne mentioned the price. She wanted to sell a 200-year-old colonial mansion on 50 acres for exactly $1. $1. Maya grabbed her keys before the old woman finished talking. The Blackwood Manor sat at the end of a winding dirt road, 40 minutes outside Portland, buried so deep in the Maine woods that Maya's GPS gave up halfway there. She had to follow Eleanor's handwritten directions, scrawled on notebook paper in shaking cursive. "Turn left at the lightning-struck pine, right at the stone well. Follow the road until the trees start whispering." Maya assumed that last part was poetic license. She was wrong. As her Honda Civic climbed deeper into the hills, the forest around her began to change. The trees grew taller, older, their branches interlocking overhead to block out most of the October sun. And there was something else. A sound like wind through leaves, except there was no wind. The branches hung perfectly still, but the whispering continued. She told herself it was just the sound of her tires on gravel, or maybe distant traffic. But when she turned off her engine at the end of the road, the whispering didn't stop. The Blackwood Manor rose from the mist like something out of a Gothic nightmare. 3 stories of weathered clapboard and black shutters, with a wraparound porch that sagged under the weight of 2 centuries. Gnarled oak trees pressed close against the house on all sides, their branches scratching against the windows like arthritic fingers. But the strangest thing about the house wasn't its appearance. It was the absolute stillness around it. No birds sang, no insects buzzed. Even the whispering from the forest had stopped the moment Maya stepped out of her car. It was as if the entire world had held its breath. Maya walked up the front steps, each board groaning under her weight. The front door was massive, solid oak bound with iron hinges that looked medieval. A brass knocker shaped like a raven hung in the center, its eyes made of black glass that seemed to track her movement. She raised her hand to knock, but the door swung open before she could touch it. "Hello?" Maya called into the darkness beyond the threshold. "Mrs. Thorne?" No answer, just the echo of her own voice disappearing into the house. Maya stepped inside and immediately understood why Eleanor Thorne had refused to come back. The air inside the Blackwood Manor was wrong. Not just stale or musty. Those were smells she was used to in old houses. This was something else entirely. The air felt thick, almost liquid, like breathing through wet cotton. And there was a sound underneath everything, so low she felt it more than heard it. A thrumming, like a massive heartbeat buried in the walls. The interior was a maze of dark wood paneling and burgundy wallpaper that seemed to shift patterns when she wasn't looking directly at it. Oil paintings lined the hallways, portraits of stern-faced people in colonial dress, their eyes following her as she moved through the house. Maya tried to focus on the job. Square footage, architectural details, potential selling points. But her attention kept drifting to the little things that didn't make sense. All the clocks in the house had stopped at 3:17, every single one. The mirrors were covered with black cloth, as if the house were in mourning. And in every room, without exception, there was a rocking chair facing the window. Maya was examining the crown molding in the dining room when she heard it. A child's voice, singing somewhere upstairs. "Ring around the rosy, pocket full of posies." The voice was sweet, innocent, and absolutely terrifying in the context of this empty house. Maya froze, her hand still tracing the elaborate woodwork. "Ashes, ashes, we all fall down." The singing stopped abruptly, replaced by the sound of small feet running across the floor above her head. Back and forth, like a child playing a frantic game of tag with invisible friends. Maya forced herself to climb the stairs to investigate. The second floor was laid out like a traditional colonial home, a central hallway with bedrooms branching off on either side. She checked each room systematically, but they were all empty. Furnished, but empty. Except for the nursery at the end of the hall. The door was painted white with yellow trim and a wooden nameplate hung at child height. Lily. Maya pushed the door open and stepped into a room that belonged in a magazine spread about Victorian childhood. A wooden rocking horse sat in the corner, its painted eyes bright and knowing. Shelves lined the walls, filled with antique dolls that seemed to watch her every movement. And in the center of the room, a white crib with lace curtains. Maya approached the crib cautiously. Inside, nestled among silk pillows, was a single photograph. It showed a little girl, maybe 4 years old, with dark curls and bright eyes. She was standing in front of the Blackwood Manor, holding the hand of a tall woman in a black dress. Maya picked up the photograph for a closer look and nearly dropped it. The woman in the black dress was Eleanor Thorne, but not the elderly Eleanor who had called her that morning. This Eleanor looked exactly as she had sounded on the phone, middle-aged, desperate, and terrified. The photograph was dated 1987. Maya stared at the date, trying to make sense of it. If Eleanor Thorne had been middle-aged in 1987, she would be in her 70s or 80s now. But the woman on the phone had sounded much older. Ancient, even. She was still puzzling over this when she heard footsteps in the hallway behind her. Slow, deliberate steps, accompanied by the tap-tap-tap of a walking cane against hardwood. Maya turned toward the door, expecting to see Eleanor Thorne finally arriving for their appointment. The hallway was empty, but the footsteps continued, growing closer. Tap, 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 step, tap, 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 step. Maya pressed herself against the far wall of the nursery, her heart hammering in her chest. The footsteps stopped directly outside the door. For a long moment, there was absolute silence. Then a voice spoke from the hallway. Not Eleanor's voice. This was different. Younger. Sweeter. Mama? Is that you, Mama? I've been waiting so long. Maya held her breath, afraid to move, afraid to make any sound that might draw attention to her presence. The voice continued, plaintive and heartbreaking. I tried to be good, Mama. I tried to wait like you told me. But it's been so dark, and I'm scared. Why won't you come find me? The door to the nursery began to creak open, inch by inch. Maya watched in horror as a small shadow fell across the threshold. The shadow of a child, cast by no visible source. Please, Mama. I just want to go home. The shadow stepped into the room, and Maya saw her. A little girl in a white nightgown, her dark curls hanging loose around her shoulders. She looked exactly like the child in the photograph, except for her eyes. Where the photo showed bright, living eyes full of innocence, this child's eyes were black pits of despair. The girl turned toward Maya, and her face broke into a smile that was all wrong, too wide, showing too many teeth. "You're not my mama," she said, her voice dropping to a whisper. "But you'll do." Maya ran. She bolted from the nursery, down the hallway, down the stairs, her footsteps echoing through the house like gunshots. Behind her, she could hear the child's laughter, high and delighted, as if this were all a wonderful game. Maya reached the front door and grabbed the handle, but it wouldn't turn. She twisted and pulled, throwing her entire weight against the door, but it held fast. It was as if the house itself had decided she wasn't allowed to leave. The laughter behind her grew closer, accompanied now by other sounds. Adult footsteps joining the child's, voices whispering her name, the sound of rocking chairs creaking in unison throughout the house. Maya stumbled through the first floor, looking for another exit. The windows were sealed shut, their latches rusted in place. The back door was locked from the inside, but the key was nowhere to be found. She was trapped. That's when she found the basement door. It was hidden behind a bookshelf in the library, revealed only when Maya accidentally knocked over a heavy volume of family genealogy. The door was narrow and painted black, with a simple brass handle that turned easily in her hand. Maya hesitated. Every instinct screamed at her not to go down there, not to descend into the darkness beneath this cursed house. But the voices upstairs were getting closer, and she could hear small feet pattering down the main staircase. She opened the basement door and started down the stone steps. The basement was older than the house above it, much older. The walls were rough fieldstone, held together with mortar that crumbled at her touch. The ceiling was low, forcing Maya to duck in places, and the air smelled of earth and something else, something sweet and rotten that made her gag. In the center of the basement, illuminated by a shaft of gray light from a small window, sat an old wooden chair. Ropes hung from its arms and legs, and dark stains covered the seat and backrest. But it wasn't the chair that made Maya's blood freeze. It was what surrounded it. Dozens of photographs covered the stone walls, hundreds of them, all showing the same scene, the Blackwood Manor, taken from the same angle, in the same light. But the people in the photographs were different. Different families, different time periods, different faces. All of them looked terrified. Maya moved closer to examine the photos. Some were daguerreotypes from the 1800s, showing families in formal Victorian dress standing stiffly in front of the house. Others were more recent, Polaroids from the 1970s and 80s, color prints from the 90s, even some that looked like they'd been taken with digital cameras. But in every single photograph, the people shared the same expression of abject horror. Parents clutching children, elderly couples holding hands as if facing execution, young families with babies, their faces masks of desperation. And at the bottom of each photograph, written in the same shaking handwriting she'd seen on Eleanor's directions, were names and dates. The Morrison family, 1847, 1849, the Chen family, 1923, 1925, the Rodriguez family, 1956, 1961, the Thorne family, 1987. Maya stared at the last entry. The Thorne family photograph showed Eleanor as she appeared in the nursery picture. Middle-aged and desperate, but standing next to her was the little girl, Lily, her bright eyes full of trust. At the bottom of this photograph, someone had written additional notes in red ink. Lily, taken by the house October 31st, 1987. Eleanor, still feeding it, still trying to bring her back. Maya's hands shook as she pulled out her phone to take pictures of the wall. She had to document this, had to get evidence to the police. But her phone screen was black, completely dead despite being fully charged when she'd entered the house. That's when she heard Eleanor's voice behind her. "I see you found my gallery." Maya spun around. Eleanor Thorne stood at the bottom of the basement stairs, but she looked nothing like the desperate woman Maya had imagined. This Eleanor was ancient, easily 90 years old, her white hair hanging in thin strands around a face that was more skull than flesh. Her eyes were clouded with cataracts, but they fixed on Maya with unnatural precision. 36 years, Eleanor continued, her voice a papery whisper. 36 years I've been bringing people to this house, trying to give it what it wants. But it's never enough. It takes them, but it won't give her back. "Mrs. Thorne," Maya said, backing against the photo-covered wall, "we need to call the police. These pictures—" Eleanor laughed, a sound like autumn leaves cracking underfoot. "The police? Oh, child, the police were here in 1987. The FBI came in 1994. The state investigators came in 2003. They all saw what you're seeing now, and then they all decided it was better to leave this place alone." "That's impossible. They wouldn't just cover it up, pretend it doesn't exist?" Eleanor stepped closer, and Maya could smell the decay on her breath. "There are things in this world that are too dangerous to expose, too hungry to contain. The Blackwood Manor is one of them. It's been feeding for over 200 years, and it's not going to stop now." Maya tried to push past the old woman, but Eleanor's hand shot out with surprising speed, gripping Maya's wrist with fingers that felt like steel cables. "She's still here, you know," Eleanor whispered. "My little Lily. Still 4 years old, still waiting for her mama to find her. The house keeps her that way, keeps her young and scared and alone. It feeds on her terror, and she feeds on the terror of others." "Let me go," Maya said, struggling against the old woman's grip. "I can't," Eleanor said, and for the first time Maya heard genuine sadness in her voice. "Don't you understand? I'm not the one choosing who comes here. The house is. It calls to people, makes them want to visit, makes them curious about the low price or the remote location. It chose you, Maya Chen, just like it chose all the others." Eleanor gestured to the photographs on the wall. Every realtor in Maine, every paranormal investigator, every urban explorer and treasure hunter and curious teenager, they all get the same call, the same irresistible offer. And they all end up down here, in my gallery. Maya looked again at the photographs, understanding dawning with horrible clarity. The dates weren't random. They were regular, systematic. Every few years, like clockwork, new faces appeared on the wall. "The house needs fresh fear," Eleanor continued. "It feeds on terror, but old terror grows stale, so it calls new people, and I help them find their way here, because maybe this time, if I give it exactly what it wants, It will finally let my daughter go." "You're insane," Maya whispered. "Am I?" Eleanor's grip tightened. "Look around you, child. Look at where you are, how you got here. You came because you couldn't resist the mystery, couldn't ignore the impossible price. That wasn't your choice. That was the house, calling to you across the miles, planting thoughts in your head, making you drive here against every rational instinct." Maya tried to deny it, but the words stuck in her throat. Because Eleanor was right. She had felt compelled to come here, drawn by something more than professional curiosity. "The house has been watching you for weeks," Eleanor said, "learning your habits, your fears, your desires. It knows you're ambitious, driven, willing to take risks for the right opportunity. It made itself irresistible to you specifically." As if summoned by their conversation, the voices upstairs began again. Not just Lily this time, but dozens of voices. Men, women, children, all calling Maya's name, all begging her to come play with them. "They're all still here," Eleanor said, her clouded eyes turning toward the ceiling. "Every person who ever entered this house. It keeps them, feeds on them, uses them to lure others. And now it wants you too." The lights in the basement began to flicker. In the strobing illumination, Maya could see that the photographs on the walls were moving. The terrified faces were turning toward her, their mouths opening in silent screams. "There is one way out," Eleanor said suddenly. "One way to break the cycle." Maya looked at her with desperate hope. Someone has to stay willingly. Someone has to choose to remain, to feed the house forever, so that all the others can go free. Eleanor's ancient fingers reached up to touch Maya's face. "I've been trying to make that choice for 36 years, but the house won't let me. It knows I'm only here for Lily. But if someone else stayed, someone with no connection to the house, no hope of rescue, you want me to sacrifice myself." "I want you to save everyone," Eleanor said, "including my daughter." The house shuddered around them, as if it were listening to their conversation and growing impatient. Dust rained from the ceiling, and the photographs on the walls began to peel and flutter like living things. Maya closed her eyes, trying to think clearly despite the terror flooding her system. There had to be another way. Some escape Eleanor hadn't considered. That's when she remembered her phone. It was dead, yes, but not because the battery had drained. The screen was cracked, as if something had struck it from the inside. And in the web of cracks, Maya could see faint letters forming words. "Run now." She looked up at Eleanor, whose attention was focused on the increasingly agitated voices upstairs. Moving as quietly as possible, Maya slipped her hand into her pocket and found her car keys. The house might be able to control doors and windows, but maybe it couldn't stop a car. Maya pretended to stumble, breaking free from Eleanor's grip. Before the old woman could react, Maya was racing up the basement stairs, through the library, toward the front of the house. But instead of trying the door again, she ran straight for the large bay window in the living room. Maya grabbed a heavy brass candlestick from the mantelpiece and hurled it at the glass. The window exploded outward in a shower of glittering shards, and cold October air rushed into the house. Behind her, every voice in the Blackwood Manor screamed in unison, a sound of rage and hunger and desperate need that made Maya's bones ache. She dove through the broken window, hit the porch hard, rolled to her feet, and ran for her car without looking back. The Honda started on the first try, and Maya had never been more grateful for reliable Japanese engineering. She threw the car in reverse and gunned it down the dirt road, branches scraping against the windows as she fled. In her rearview mirror, she could see the house receding into the mist. But just before it disappeared entirely, Maya saw something that made her floor the accelerator. Every window in the Blackwood Manor was filled with faces, dozens of them, pressed against the glass from the inside. Men, women, children, all the people who had entered the house over the past 2 centuries. All of them were screaming. Maya didn't stop driving until she reached the Portland city limits. She pulled into the first gas station she saw and called 911 from a payphone, her hands shaking so badly she could barely dial. The police were polite but skeptical. They took her statement, asked a few follow-up questions, and promised to send someone to check on Eleanor Thorne. But Maya could tell from their expressions that they thought she was having some kind of breakdown. 3 days later, she got a call from the Cumberland County Sheriff's Department. They had investigated the address Maya provided, but found no house matching her description. According to their records, that particular section of County Road dead-ended at an old quarry that had been abandoned since the 1950s. Maya drove back there herself, following her own tire tracks in the mud. The road ended exactly where the police said it did, at a chain-link fence surrounding a water-filled quarry. There was no dirt road leading into the forest, no lightning-struck pine, no stone well, no Blackwood Manor. Maya quit real estate the next day. She moved to California, changed her name, started over completely. She thought she had escaped. But 6 months later, she received a package with no return address. Inside was a photograph of the Blackwood Manor, taken from the front yard in perfect afternoon light. The house looked exactly as she remembered it. Imposing, Gothic, surrounded by ancient oaks. But there was something new in one of the upstairs windows. A face pressed against the glass, barely visible but unmistakably there. It was Maya herself, staring out from inside the house with an expression of absolute terror. At the bottom of the photograph, in that same shaking handwriting, someone had written, "The Chen family, 2024. Maya has moved 7 times since then, changed her name twice more. But the photographs keep finding her. Sometimes they show up in her mailbox. Sometimes they're slipped under her hotel room door. Once she found one tucked inside her morning coffee cup at a Starbucks in Denver. Each photograph is slightly different. In some, her face in the window is clearer. In others, she's standing in different rooms of the house. But they all share the same message. The Blackwood Manor is waiting for her to come home. And Maya is starting to think that running might not be enough. That some places don't just haunt you, they own you. That maybe the only way to stop the photographs, stop the dreams, stop the constant feeling of being watched, is to give the house what it wants. She's been having conversations with Eleanor Thorne in her dreams. The old woman keeps telling her the same thing. You can't escape what you've seen. You can't unknow what you know. The only way out is through. Last week, Maya found herself looking up flights to Portland, Maine. She caught herself before booking, but the urge is getting stronger. The house is calling her home. And Maya is beginning to think she might just answer. That was Maya Chen's story, told to us through a series of encrypted messages sent from different locations across the country. We tried to verify her account, reached out to the Cumberland County Sheriff's Department, even hired a private investigator to search property records in Maine. Here's what we found. There is no current property matching the description of the Blackwood Manor. But there are records of a colonial house that once stood in that area, built in 1823, destroyed by fire in 1987. The last residents were listed as Eleanor and Lily Thorne. Eleanor was reported missing after the fire. Lily's body was never found. Officially, Maya Chen doesn't exist. But the investigator did find records of 3 other real estate agents who disappeared in Maine over the past 15 years. All of them were last seen investigating rural properties with unusually low asking prices. Maya, if you're listening, we hope you stay strong. We hope you keep running, but we also want you to know that you're not alone. There are others out there who have seen things they can't explain, who carry secrets too dark to share with the people they love. And to our listeners, remember this. Not every bargain is a blessing. Not every opportunity is worth taking. Sometimes the price is too low because the cost is too high. If you ever find yourself drawn to a place that feels wrong, that calls to you in ways you can't explain, trust your instincts. Trust that little voice in your head that tells you to run. Because some houses don't just want visitors. Some houses want to keep you forever. Thank you for joining us tonight on Grudge and Grace. If you have a story that's been haunting you, something that happened that you can't forget, reach out to us through our encrypted tip line. Because here at Grudge and Grace, we know that the most terrifying stories are the ones that refuse to stay buried. Until next time, keep your doors locked, your escape routes planned, and remember, If something seems too good to be true, it probably wants to eat you. Sweet dreams.